All right, so what we're going to do today, we are going to look at Spanish settlements in the Caribbean. Uh, we are going to identify the main Spanish settlements in the Caribbean and explain the choices for explain why they would have selected where they would have settled. So we know for sure that the European would have explored a European exploration, right? And the Christopher Columbus, he arrived in the Caribbean around 1492. In 1492, and he would have spent roughly a year in the Caribbean from 1492 to well, not even a year, but he would have spent from 1492 to 1493. Then he would have made another voyage in the Caribbean between 1493 to 1496. Then 1498 to the 1500 and 1502 to 1504. So these were the voyages of Christopher Columbus into the Caribbean. Now we're going to trace Christopher Columbus' first voyage into the Caribbean when he first arrived in the region, right? So Christopher Columbus would be coming from the Canary Islands. Remember that he would have gone to the Canary Islands, and from the Canary Islands, he was expected to find a route to the East Indies. However, he would have ended up in the Caribbean. So this is Christopher Columbus and his men traveling into the Caribbean, and they would have reached this location right here, which is San Salvador. They call it San Salvador, which is an island in the Bahamas. And they reached here and they discovered, well, by the end, I don't know at what point in the trip they would have discovered that, listen, we're not in the East Indies, but they thought originally that they were in the East, right? And so they would have reached here on this island right here, and the Taínos were the ones who took them around to show them the different parts. So the only islands that he would have visited in the Caribbean during this time, he would have visited some of these islands in the Bahamas. And if you realize that they have Christopher Columbus on a zigzag, because they would have bring him all over here, then they bring him to Cuba. So he's in Cuba, make his rounds in Cuba. He went very deep inland in Cuba around right here. Continue. And they have Christopher Columbus all over the place. The Taínos showing Christopher Columbus and his men, the Spanish, all the Spanish people. some of the islands of the region. By the time he would have reached Cuba, he would have, by this time, Christopher Columbus would have discovered that, listen, this doesn't look like the East Indies, this looks like the West. And so he would have continued, and they brought him to Hispaniola. But remember that they named the place Hispaniola. All of this island was originally called Haiti. All of this island was called Haiti. All of Hispaniola. So they would have the indigenous people call the entire island Haiti. And so the places that he would have visited would have been what we call today islands in the Bahamas, Cuba, and Hispaniola, and also the Turks and Caicos Islands. He would have also visited the Turks and Caicos Islands and back to Europe, to Spain, right? So that was his first voyage in 1492 to 1493. On his second voyage in 1493, so for his second voyage, 1493 to 1496, he came into the Caribbean by a different route or route. So he entered the Caribbean between these islands, what is now today Dominica and Guadeloupe. So he entered the Caribbean through Dominica and Guadeloupe. On his second voyage, went up, visit Nevis, then St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, then Puerto Rico, right? Then on his second voyage, he would have made a stop in Jamaica on the south coast here, and also on the part of the north coast of Jamaica, visited southern Cuba, Hispaniola, again, back to Spain. That was his second voyage. So on his second voyage, he would have visited places like Dominica, but he was unsuccessful there. Couldn't come off the ship really, because we're going to discuss that in a little bit. Guadeloupe, same problem. Nevis, same problem. Virgin Islands, and all of these different places on his second voyage. His third voyage, he came into the Caribbean using a different route. So every time he came into the Caribbean, he would have used, and I don't think it was because he wanted to use, maybe he wanted to find the first route or route that he would have taken, right? But you realize that he's all over the place. Or maybe, and I would say that he could not have found, he was trying to find back the original route, but every time he visited the Caribbean for sure, we know that a stop was made in Hispaniola. Always make a stop in his first voyage, Hispaniola, second one, Hispaniola, third one, Hispaniola. From Hispaniola, didn't go much of the islands on his third voyage, he just went back to Spain. And then on his final voyage, which is his fourth voyage in the Caribbean, he would have entered again, well, not really entered from this side, because on his third voyage, he would have entered the Caribbean from Trinidad ends. Okay, from Trinidad, he would have entered the Caribbean from Trinidad, stopped in some part of South America, then move up. On his next voyage, he would have entered from Martinique and Dominica. So he was close, because on his second voyage, he would have entered Dominica, between Dominica and Guadeloupe. Now is between Dominica and Martinique. And then he would have made stops in Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Jamaica, Cuba, Panama, parts of Central America, back to Spain. All right. So he made 4 voyages in the Caribbean. Now, in 1492, when he arrived in the Caribbean, there's one thing that we need to know, ladies, that no settlement was established in the Caribbean in 1492. So they didn't settle, but on the island of Hispaniola, they would have established a fort there, and the Taínos would have destroyed the fort. But all of his voyages, he would have stopped on the island of Hispaniola. In 1493, when he arrived again, they would have established settlement on Hispaniola. So that was the first settlement of the Spanish in the Americas on the island of Hispaniola. The Taínos, they call the island Haiti. However, Christopher Columbus would have changed the name from Haiti to Hispaniola. And on that island, they found gold. But some of the settlers came down with sickness and they died. 1498, again, he would have arrived. We would have looked at his trip. And then also 1502, 1503, he would have arrived in the Caribbean. Now, Columbus, so the last time Columbus would have arrived in the Caribbean, the last time he spent in the Caribbean was between 1502 to 1504. That was the last time. He left the Caribbean in 1504. Now, by this time, 1508, they would have settled Puerto Rico, the Spanish. So they settled on Hispaniola. Then by 1508, a new set of Spanish settled Hispaniola. And by 1511, they settled on Jamaica. So these were the places that they would have settled originally: Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, right? Sorry, 1509, they settled in Jamaica, and by 1511, Cuba. So 1493, Hispaniola, right? 1493, Hispaniola. 1509, Jamaica. 1511, Cuba. All right. And 1508, Puerto Rico. Now in 1511, and I was quite surprised that in 1511 they would have captured. So the Taino, this Taino cacique, he was quite prominent in Hispaniola. He would have escaped from Hispaniola and went to Cuba, informed the Tainos in Cuba that, listen, things is not right. The Spanish, they are taking over Hispaniola. And so they put up a warfare against Christopher Columbus, and Christopher Columbus would have captured and killed this Spanish cacique. He was very, very powerful cacique, right? And so we know for sure, one thing we know for sure, because the mere fact that he would have escaped from Hispaniola to Cuba show that they would have, all the different Taino groups would have, our settlement would have known about each other, and they would have interacted. Now, I want to bring you to the point of Jamaica, that in 1509, when they went to Jamaica, they settled, they would have settled in Jamaica, and they established two settlements. The first one was Sevilla Nueva, which is New Seville. Anybody has ever been there before? New Seville, which is in St. Anna. And also they would have settled in Villa de la Vega, which is today's Spanish Town. Anybody has ever been to Spanish Town?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So those were the two settlements. Spanish Town was established in 1534, I believe. But in Jamaica, they found no gold, and they only used Jamaica for small farms. They found gold in Puerto Rico, they found little gold in Cuba, they found gold in Hispaniola, but they found no gold in Jamaica. So they really never, the Spanish really didn't business much about Jamaica, right? They settled here, but it wasn't anything that, Jamaica wasn't all that for them. All right, ladies. So one thing that we should realize, one thing for sure, is that the Spanish concentrated their efforts on the large islands in the Greater Antilles. They settled Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Cuba. They didn't settle on the Lesser Antilles, right? They didn't settle in the Lesser Antilles, and they didn't settle on the smaller territories within this part in the Northern Caribbean. Now, main reason for their choice of settlement, one of the reasons why they would have settled in Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and Cuba was because in these territories, they found golds or nuggets. These nuggets were these small little golds. And the Tainos would have used these golds a lot. And a lot of ornaments that they would have used, even feathers they brought back to Spain. And another reason why they would, so that was the main reason that they decided to settle those areas. Then after that, now, another reason was because of the land in the Greater Antilles. They have quite a lot of valleys and plains that were very good for farming. And they found out that the Taínos, they were docile. They weren't that aggressive as the Kalinagos. So they were able to establish settlement, although we have evidence that the Taínos would have fought against them. So we know for sure that they would have settled the Greater Antilles, in the Greater Antilles and the larger islands. Now, one of the main reasons I bring this picture is that most Cuba, Jamaica, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, the geography of these territories or the topography of these territories are very, very, very similar, right? So if you look at Kingston, Kingston is very flat. Well, not flat, but it's above sea level. But there's a vast plain that you're looking at. So if you look at this area right here, you realize that most of the mountains in Jamaica is in the center of the island. You have ever come
Yes, sir.
to realization? So if you look, ladies, Jamaica, most of the islands in the Greater Antilles, they had this, they are very large and they have a lot of land, and most of the mountains were in the center of most of the mountains are in the center of the island. So it gave them the opportunity to venture into these islands, right? And to settle them. And the lands were suited for farming. On the other hand, in the Lesser Antilles, they don't, in the Lesser Antilles, this is how the Lesser Antilles would have looked, where most the islands were very mountainous. They didn't have much plains and they didn't have uh, quite a lot of valleys, right? So, or if they do have valleys, the valleys were not that big valleys. So it was very mountainous. Even if you look at Dominica, you're realizing that there's no coast, there's no sea. Sea is here, but there's no coastal area where a ship could dock and people go on and all of these different stuff, right? The terrain was very mountainous. And so they didn't settle in the Lesser Antilles because one, they found no precious metal there. They couldn't, because if they come off the ship, really, they're going to be in problem with the Kalinagos. Right? The place was very mountainous, so they couldn't, for, for transportation or communication, they had struggled with the Kalinagos. This area was very difficult for rearing of cattle, right? It was densely forested, as you can see. In the case of Jamaica, Cuba, and Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, most of the densely populated, well, most of the forested area is in the center of the island, right? These islands, the mountainous areas are in the center. While for the other territories, the entire island is just mountainous in the Lesser Antilles. So they didn't settle much in the Lesser Antilles. And so there was no precious metals. The Lesser Antilles, based on its area, they could not do any form of agriculture there. Very forested area, very mountainous, and they had struggled with the Kalinagos there, right? The indigenous people, uh, So the Taínos, not the Taínos, the Kalinagos would have already spread the word already that, listen, they take over Puerto Rico. So guess what? We have to protect the other place. So the Kalinagos, they would have put up a resistance on these islands, right? In the Lesser Antilles that they would have dominated. The Europeans, they faced a lot of issues, problems, difficulties. They faced a lot of difficulties in the Caribbean. The tropical conditions, they had to deal with the rough terrains, especially in the Lesser Antilles and also in Hispaniola, the terrain, the mountains, they had to deal with that, and that is going to cause problem. And also hurricane. In 1502, they experienced hurricane for the very first time, and that would have destroyed Santo Domingo. So they would have established settlement here in Santo Domingo, and the hurricane would have destroyed Santo Domingo in 1502. So those were some of these problems that they would have faced. Death, some of them died, some maybe from, I wouldn't say diseases, but they would have died from, because they were the ones who brought the diseases into the Caribbean. Most of them died from hunger and warfare, right? So for example, Columbus on his second voyage in the Caribbean arrived with 1,500 men, and he returned only with 220 men, and 300 would have remained. So almost 900 men died in the Caribbean on his second voyage. That was very risky. And another difficulty was that they faced resistance from the Taínos and the Kalinagos, guerrilla tactics, and fort was destroyed, and also they faced food shortage in the Caribbean. So these were some of the difficulties that they would have faced in the Caribbean. Next. The Spanish, once they arrived and settled in the Caribbean, they would have, once they arrive and settled in the Caribbean, they are going to do quite a lot of economic activities. One of the main activity that they're going to do is that what they did was that they mined for gold and silver. They brought goats into the Caribbean and pigs and chicken, and they are going to go into cattle ranching, right? Where they are going to raise these animals on the plains. Also, they are going to go into shipbuilding, trying to perfect the ships that they are coming in with. And they are going to use some of the techniques of the Taínos in building their ships. They are going to trade goods such as get the indigenous people to make the hammocks, and they are going to trade the animal skin. From the animals, they are going to use the hide for the candles and for oil. They are going to trade tobacco. They are going to plant some sugar, but not much, just a small amount of sugar they are going to plant, and cotton, right? They are going to also dive in for gold. They are going to dive for gold. So all of the islands now in the Greater Antilles, they are going to encourage the Taínos to get gold, sorry, not gold, pearl. get pearl for them. And also farming. They were very involved into farming, and they are going to bring new things into the Caribbean. They are going to use some of the Taínos farming techniques. They are going to use, for example, and also products such as cassava. They are going to bring into the Caribbean citrus, sugar, banana, squash. And these, well, not squash, but sugar, citrus, and banana. Squash is something like pumpkin. And they are going to plant these, and they are going to use it for their own things. Right? Now on Hispaniola, which is here, let us look at some of the economic activities on Hispaniola, what they're going to do on Hispaniola. One thing we know for sure was that they would have mines. Somebody, could you read this for me, please?
In Hispaniola, the Spanish grew tobacco and some sugar. There was also cattle ranches. The colony was the administrative center. Most of the settlements were on the southern side. Metal was found in several places, but principally in the San Cristobal district under Ovando. Production was increased by reducing the royal share from one half to one fifth and by awarding mining licenses to those who produced the most gold.
Thank you very much. So at this time in the early 1500s, Hispaniola was the center of the Caribbean. Most of the settlements were established on the southern parts, which is right here. And as correctly stated, they would have grew tobacco, sugar, and they would have gone into cattle ranching. Very important area, right? Cuba, could I get somebody to read Cuba for me, please?
In Cuba, there was a cattle ranching as well as a ship. Hello?
Mars, I think you're breaking up.
Oh, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, I am.
In Cuba, there were cattle ranching as well as a shipbuilding center. The convoy stopped here before returning to Spain and made repairs as necessary. Gold was found in numerous mountain streams in the central part of the island.
All right, so that was for Cuba. Let us hear from for Jamaica. Someone else, please.
In Jamaica, the settlers were farmers, and there were also several cattle ranches. Of the Greater Antilles, Jamaica, which was the only island in which gold was not found.
Yes, they didn't know gold was found in Jamaica. All right, Puerto Rico.
In Puerto Rico, gold was discovered and mined in the streams of the Central Mountain Range, but most abundantly in the northeastern section of the island.
Very good. So there were a lot of gold found in Puerto Rico. Trinidad.
In Trinidad, there was little economic activity. It was really used as a base from which to explore the South American countries.
All right, good. Then they are going to use Trinidad to explore South America, and they are going to use Cuban Hispaniola to explore Central America. Huh? Once they reach Central America, ladies, what is going to happen is that they're going to realize that you thought that Puerto Rico had gold or Hispaniola or Cuba. We know that Jamaica is not important because there's no gold there. when they arrived in Hispaniola, Mexico, and they saw gold that the Mayans would have used, oh yes, there's going to be big exploration into Central America and South America, because those are the islands over here. Yes, we are grateful for you, but guess what? We have found the greater abundance of gold. Somebody, could you read this for me, please?
The Spanish in areas such as Mexico, which became an administrative center after its conquest, Peru and Bolivia. The major attraction of these countries was the mineral wealth.
Conquistadores.
The conquistadores found in this part of the Americas the wealth which Columbus had earlier promised. Within 25 years, the mines of Hispaniola were practically exhausted.
All right.
While those in
Continue.
Puerto Rico and Cuba were almost worked out in half that time. In Hispaniola, Puerto Rico and Cuba, agriculture was developed to provide gold miners and Spanish colonists with food and certain supplies from Spain could not supply.
All right. So, although they would have, thank you very much, although they would have left, not really left, they still remained on Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Jamaica. But they would have used these areas after they found much gold on the Central American coast and South America. They use this area to produce food for Spain, and so they are supplying Spain with all of these different food. All right, somebody, could you read this for me, please?
As gold production began to fall off and miners moved away, cultivators turned to exploring agricultural produce as a substitute for the loss of local sales. Only in Jamaica, where no gold was found, did the agriculture begin and remain an important economic activity from the time the island was colonized.
All right. So we know for sure, ladies, that no gold was in Jamaica. No gold. They found no gold in Jamaica, right? And so they started to colonize other places. So, ladies, just to let you know, always remember that Columbus would have arrived in the Caribbean. Columbus would have had 4 voyages in the Caribbean. He arrived 1492, 1493, 1498, 1502. Some books say 1503. He would have settled in Hispaniola. Hispaniola was the first settlement in 1493. Other settlement, Puerto Rico 1508, then Jamaica 1509, Cuba was 1511. And after that, they would have used Jamaica for farming, while all the territories were used for farming, but because no gold was there, they really neglected Jamaica. Jamaica was not important for them. But the other islands like Puerto Rico and Hispaniola and Cuba, it was very important until they would have discovered Central America, not discovered, they would have arrived in Central America, where they would have gone into, they saw an abundance of gold there, minerals, and from there they are going to start to use the Caribbean to do mainly their farming, because there's not much mining that you could have done. Always remember the reason why they chose the Greater Antilles and also the reasons why they would have neglected the Lesser Antilles, and some of the difficulties that the Europeans, the Spanish, would have faced in the Caribbean. All right, ladies? That's
Yes,
it
sir.
for today's class. Any question, any comment?
So will we get in test on this tomorrow?
No, I would never give you a test on this topic.
Just